and welcome to the BPD Bunch Brunch, where we get together with our favorite brunchy beverages to catch up, play games, and talk about all things BPD. I'm your host, Xannie, and today I am here with Georgette, Carys, Madhurima, Jess, and André. Where in the world is everyone coming from, and what is your brunchy beverage for the day?
I'm in New Jersey, and I have my tea and seltzer.
I'm in Southampton, and I have to stress that this is Southampton in the UK and not the one in America, because some people have thought that I lived in the Hamptons and I was extremely well off. My brunchy beverage is we call it cordial over here. So basically, it's the juice that you mix with water, sugar-free, and that's the way for me today.
I am just outside of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. I have my trusty Canadian staple beverage.
What's the Canadian, did you say the national drink or what was it?
Tim Hortons.
Yeah, our Canadian national beverage is Tim Hortons coffee.
Oh, I'm in Canada too, so I'm in Toronto, and my drink, I don't know, it's afternoon. I've been up for quite some time, so I'm drinking just bubbly water.
I'm from India, Kolkata in India, and today I have surprise. I don't have water. I have iced tea with me.
She's changing it up.
Yeah,
I've got just some peppermint tea and water. Today, we're going to play a game called Fact versus Myth. We're going to read out some statements and then talk about whether they are facts or myths. And if they're myths, we're going to come up with ways to challenge them so that they are more factual, or at least more balanced. Are we ready to go?
We're doing
Yes.
it.
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. All right. The first one, only women have BPD.
Myth!
Obviously, because otherwise Andre wouldn't be here.
Did you see my confused look? I wasn't expecting that one.
Why do we think that is a stereotype?
I think it's partially based on, I think it is a fact that there are, like, percentage-wise, a larger number of women diagnosed with it.
The estimated percentage is that it's even, but the actual diagnosed numbers is definitely skewed.
Well, Andrea, I was going to ask what you think about it, because as somebody who is male and diagnosed with BPD, I feel like you have a unique perspective.
I'm hoping that I've got a unique perspective, but even for myself, it was somewhat confusing. So a lot of men, the attributes, the negative attributes even, that can be attributed to EUPD in England and BPD are very much more in line with what people think men's bad behavior tends to be like anyway. So when men exhibit these behaviors, family members or friends, I think, are less likely to say, I think you might need help. Whereas when my female friends, trans friends have exhibited that behavior, people have often said, oh, it's unwomanly, it doesn't suit you.
With women, a lot of us may receive it as a misdiagnosis. It's possible that we're seeing a skew in both directions. So like women receiving a BPD diagnosis when they actually have like autism spectrum disorder or ADHD and depression or, some other thing. And they're just like, oh, she's obviously borderline. So you end up with a lot of us getting misdiagnosed that way. And then a lot of guys getting misdiagnosed like the other way.
Yeah, I think it doesn't help that a lot of the criteria for all kinds of psychological disorders are descriptors of outward behavior, and not like motivations are rarely, if ever, discussed. I think that would make diagnosis challenging for anyone, because it's like you can get a lot of behaviors that appear very similar but occur for very different reasons, and the treatment you would propose for those is going to be different, but it's hard to tell because the only way that we currently have of diagnosing them is just on observable behavior. So, Jess, what would be the challenge statement? If you're going to say, instead of only women have BPD, we say, what's our challenge statement going to be? Go for it.
BPD can fall anywhere along the gender spectrum.
Perfect. All right. So our next statement will be, having BPD comes with both challenges and strengths.
True.
Yeah, fact.
Fact. Yep. You know, I feel like we talk about the challenges all the time. What are some of the strengths?
Resilience.
Ooh.
Empathy.
It's funny because what people often describe as being people-pleasing behavior, it's the very thing that's made me empathize with people that have been in dark places and reach down to help lift them out of this. And it's only now that I've been talking about my own mental illness and recovery that people have reached out to me and said, you did this for me back in the day, you did that for me, and so many people. So one of the strengths, I think, of BPD is that we can see into the dark places because we've been there ourselves.
Absolutely.
I think also if we're going through the work of recovery, just going through healing and recovery work, or just self-growth, or, you know, if we're going through therapy, or we're building community, or we're doing things like this, we're also developing like a lot of emotional intelligence.
I feel like I can just tell if somebody has something bothering them or there's something wrong. And I know that with borderline personality disorder, we can misread people because we're so tuned into them. But I found that I've turned it into a strength because I learned to, if I ask somebody if something's wrong and they tell me no, I put it away. I stop probing about it. And I feel like a lot of times when you ask, like, hey, it seems like you're a little off, is something bothering you? If you give people the space to like be left alone if they say no, you know, that's good. But also sometimes people say like, oh yeah, you know what? There is something. It can really help out in like social situations and stuff to just kind of say, you know, I think there's something bothering them.
The first thing that I used to throw at people, including myself, would be judgment. But I think when I learned, or as I went into recovery, I actually learned that I was more attuned to my own emotions instead of like running away from them, instead of like judging them. I could like sit down and feel them and like actually understand that they're not, it doesn't make you weak. I mean, you can feel lonely, you can feel sad, you can grieve people, you can grieve relationships, and you can feel the negatives that are out in the world, and it just makes you stronger because you own it instead of those feelings owning you. And that definitely gives you a kind of power. I don't know, like attempting to see where people are coming from and what they're feeling and what they're trying to make you understand without using like words. So you kind of learn to do that with BPD because like communication is not a strong suit usually.
Let's do another one. What is this one? BPD behavior is just attention seeking.
Myth.
Yes.
Myth.
It is indeed a myth. Why is it a myth?
If you take out the word just, then it would be fact. Because I don't see anything wrong with attention seeking. What you're doing is you're communicating with your world that you require something.
I guess there's two things. One is that I wouldn't ever categorize all BPD behavior as having a single motivation because we're complex beings and that is way too
Fair.
much. However, we should operationalize our definition of attention seeking because I do tend to look at the term attention seeking in a very different way than most people mean when they say it. Like I reclaim it and go, yes, I want your attention. Like I'm not acting out behaviors just for myself. Like I am trying to communicate something, right? But I think what most people mean when they say attention seeking is, you know, trying to do something for the sake of controlling other people. It's a more malicious, has a more malicious connotation.
I've done both, you know. I've behaved outwardly, intentionally to try to divert somebody's attention or actions or behavior on purpose, right? Like I have done that. But I don't even think that that's a BPD thing. I think that's like a I'm being an asshole in that situation kind of thing, right? I think people often refer, when they're talking about attention seeking, I think people often refer to like neediness or self-harm or like suicidal ideation or anything where you're kind of like throwing tantrums. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. And those are all moments of crisis in BPD and intense emotional dysregulation. And in those moments, it's not at all intentional, and it's very much about like help seeking, even if it's not, you know, the right way. You kind of just grasp at whatever, like when you're in so much pain, you just kind of grasp at whatever you have to seek help. And, you know, through recovery, you kind of learn different tools to do that in a better way. But
I love that, help seeking.
All behaviors are a form of communication, and I think escalating behavior
Yes.
is can be seen as attention seeking, but what it really is the person, they do want your attention, right? They want you to pay attention to something that is wrong. So it's like, yeah, I think, yes, behavior can be attention seeking because you're communicating an increasing level of distress and you want someone to recognize that. And like you said, Jess, you know, I think everybody in their life, not just those with BPD, but everybody has probably acted in a way to get attention at some point in their life. You know, if you have been a human child, you have done that, you know?
So, Carys, what would your challenge statement to this myth be now that we've talked about it? So BPD behavior is just attention seeking. How do you reframe that?
While many types of BPD behavior may seem attention seeking, it's also possible that the person is actually seeking help.
I like it.
Alrighty. Moving on. Having BPD is a choice.
Yikes.
Myth.
myth. I don't know who would. I mean, I don't even want to say who would choose to have BPD, because I don't know. It's just a consequence of who you are, your biology, your environment, your socialization. Like, it's just an outcome. It's like anything else. It's just a part of me, right? So I don't like the idea of saying like who would choose it, because that makes it seem like it's really bad, which can be very challenging. But so are so many other things in life too, right? I think also that people choose, you know, the idea that people choose how they behave or how they act, right? And while we do all have autonomy and, you know, we can always make choices and we can always make different choices, so much of what we do, so like how we think, like we're not really choosing how we're thinking or how we're feeling, right? And behavior is kind of like an outcome of those things. And like, while yes, you choose what you do and how you behave, how you act, I think that there's also this idea that people have a lot more autonomy than they actually do. And there's like a lack of understanding. There's a lack of understanding of how our bodies and brains and behavior actually work. When like my BPD symptoms were really bad or really exacerbated, I felt out of control all of the time. I didn't feel like I was choosing anything. I didn't feel like I was in control of even, you know, of anything in my life, let alone like the worst things that I was doing in my life, right? Versus now that I have so many more tools, I have like so much more psychoeducation, I feel a lot more autonomous. I feel a lot more in control, and it's like a very clear difference in how I think and how I feel.
So, sorry, I was going to say, Madhu, do you think that where you live and grew up, having BPD seen more as a choice because of the cultural aspect at all?
Something that I have faced here is the question that the way the DSM describes our 9 criterias, they're supposedly very vague, because whenever I try to explain these to people who are close to me or to my friends or just people who come up to me asking like what is exactly borderline personality disorder, so I have to tell them, so this is how the DSM defines it. So they're like, okay, but that doesn't sound specific, because that sounds like something many people will go through and do go through, and it's like kind of like the human condition. It made me feel like I'm just exaggerating my own problems. So I told this to my therapist, and my therapist said something that resonated with me. She said that BPD is like living the human experience, but either in a scale of 0 or in a scale of 100. So it's really difficult to come to that 50 or like come in the middle part of the scale. So somebody coming with me may actually have fear of real or perceived abandonment, but my fear of abandonment had made me act out in malicious ways. It has ruined my relationships. It has made me turn into somebody that I was not proud of. It has made me harm myself, and it has crossed lines that I would definitely not choose if I had the power to. So, did I choose to be like this? No. But now that I have tools to like cope with it, I would also not say that I'm ashamed of it.
Madhurima, how would you challenge this statement?
Having BPD is not a choice. Learning to own your narrative and shaping your life around it definitely is.
Ooh, I like that.
So the next one is BPD is referred to as EUPD in some countries.
Facts.
And Andre lives in one of these countries.
Yay! So one of the major things that I had to deal with when I was first diagnosed with EUPD were a lot of people actually thought it was a completely different diagnosis to BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. So whenever you see from now on, you see something that says EUPD, please recognize that they're both the same thing and not two different clinical diagnoses. I think we should move on.
Okay. So there is no treatments that work for BPD.
Meh.
Myth.
Myth. We just filmed our treatment episode and we talked about a bunch of them. So
that's what I like about the variety we have in our cast members, because I think that there is one treatment, dialectical behavioral therapy, that is very popular and that is often talked about as if it's the only treatment for borderline personality disorder. And I think our cast goes to show that there is more than one treatment that can work for this.
Xannie, what kinds of treatments do we have reflected in the BPD bunch? So dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT.
Psychotherapy, mentalizing based therapy, schema therapy, the sort of non-therapy approach, and then also like non-specific trauma therapies. I think a lot of our cast members have tried various different things, and then we have a couple of cast members who are therapists who are learning some of the different therapies that are newer that most of us wouldn't have had the chance to go through because they weren't really out when we were going through the thick of it.
Because BPD is the most researched personality disorder right now, I'm really excited for like what's to come for personality disorders generally. Like I feel like this platform too can also just kind of shed some hope and light on what may yet be to come for people too with other personality disorders.
So Georgette, how would you reframe this? The myth is there is no treatments that work for BPD.
Okay, there are many treatments available for BPD when the individual is ready to take them on and do the work and has the right support in their mental health provider.
So our last one is, you can develop BPD without a history of big T trauma. Fact.
I like that you said big T trauma, because I think it kind of depends on how you define trauma. And all humans have experienced fear and invalidation and feeling unsafe. And, you know, all those, even if it's in less significant ways, all those little things really build up and can kind of impact you in the long run. It doesn't have to be like big T trauma. It's just how our brains and emotions and thoughts and behavior function after any kind of experience that has been harmful. Xannie, do you want to give your example?
Yeah, I mean, I have always had a very negative relationship to the word trauma because we're not clearly differentiating between the person's level of sensitivity changing how they respond to a situation versus the sort of, to the best of our ability, objective severity of a situation. I find that very problematic because I think in terms of how we communicate to each other, it makes it very unclear what we're talking about.
I kind of have been leaning more lately towards like normalizing language around trauma. But I really, really like what you said, Xannie, about like the distinction. Like when we're just talking to one another, we're usually not defining what we mean by trauma, and we're usually not distinguishing between like what's going on for somebody inside versus like the like objective perception of what happened on the outside. And then we're also not really distinguishing between like I don't want to walk around being like, you know, I've experienced all this trauma when that might be invalidating to somebody else who's experienced more extreme situations or something like that too, right? But it's all, I mean, it's like everything else. It's like a spectrum of just life events that happen to you. And I think, you know, I feel comfortable saying that every single human has trauma, has experienced trauma, and that that's just part of like life.
That's why I like phrasing it personally. Anyway, I like phrasing it as things created a trauma response. I may act out of a trauma response. Oh, well, what was the trauma? It doesn't matter. Like that's not the issue. The issue is my brain adapted this way. And my brain now does this because of something that it experienced. Whether that original experience was traumatic or not is irrelevant because it created a trauma response anyway.
Sometimes I believe that it can also be learned behavior from what we see in our parents, especially if they are like, big T trauma survivors, if I may put it that way. So for example, when we were talking about in the family culture or the intergenerational trauma episode about how trauma can be passed on from generation to generation and how we learn the coping skills that we've seen in our parents and our grandparents while they pass through so many distress situations. So looking back, even if I did not have anything huge or any kind of situation that would that I would categorize as traumatizing to me, but I think a lot of reaction that I have to distressing situations is something that I've learned from my parents. So that can also be a behavior, or like that is how probably my brain wired itself while it was growing up, that this is how you react to things, that it has learned to look for danger in every small thing. So that's how I react in small situations now. So
I really like that you shared that. I think that is really insightful. And I think that we do learn how to respond to things from the people who we look to, you know, who are teaching us. And if they have a dysfunctional way or of dealing with things, that's what we're learning ourselves also. So
regardless of whether or not you call any of this stuff trauma, we're just like navigating the human condition.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching us, hanging out and playing myth versus fact. Hopefully you learned an important nugget of wisdom to take with you on your journey. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so that you do not miss a single episode. Next week, we will be back for the last brunch episode of our season 2, which is going to be a special episode on our pets and how they help us with our mental health. So we're super excited for that. Make sure that you check us out on our Instagram at the BPD Bunch and consider supporting us on Patreon. Till next time.
Bye. Bye.
bye.
Pew, 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 and all that.